Welcome to Be Less Stupid. I'm your host, Jon Hotchkiss. On the day that Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, one of the many stupid things he promised voters was to build a great wall on our southern border, and that Mexico would pay for it.
I will build a great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
Well, it's now nearly 2.5 years later, and earlier this year, when Trump asked Mexico's president to pay for the wall, his response was, "Besa mi culo, tu gringo naranja." As for the actual wall itself, scientists, engineers, and geological surveyors say its construction is about as likely as Rose McGowan working again with Harvey Weinstein. That said, over the summer, construction firms submitted proposals for new border walls. 8 wall types were selected by 6 different contractors who now have until the end of this month to complete work on their border wall prototypes. I wanted to see how President Trump's border wall shit circus, or as the Mexicans are calling it, La Mierda de Cerco, was shaping up. So I emailed the Department of Homeland Security, left out all the shit circus talk, and asked if they would kindly give me a tour. And sure enough, they agreed. On October 17th, I went to Otay Mesa, California, to see the prototype border walls as they were being constructed. Can I ask you if you think this is a good idea?
As a Border Patrol agent, I can tell you that infrastructure works.
This is Eduardo Olmos, a U.S. Border Patrol agent, who not only answered my questions about these proposed border walls, illegal immigration, and the U.S. border, he also took me on a several-hour ride-along so I could see where he worked. Anyway, remember, I asked him if these walls were a good idea.
Again, we're not looking for one answer solution to what we're dealing here with. Infrastructure is one more component of what we use. We use technology and manpower as well.
We'll get back to Eduardo in just a bit. But first, a little history. In 2016, the Department of Homeland Security estimated that an average of 465 people a day successfully sneak into the U.S. across our 2,000-mile border with Mexico. This, despite staggering improvements to border security in the last 10 years. During the Obama administration, the number of Border Patrol agents was doubled. Improved seismic sensors, tunnel detection equipment, drones, and interactive multi-feed live streams. And yet, a recent report from Homeland Security said that after spending hundreds of millions of dollars to add an additional 11,000 sensors that detect both movement and heat, it only covered 5% of the border, and that less than 1% of apprehensions were a direct result of this new technology. So the question is, why is our border so porous? Because no one has yet figured out how to stop people who want to escape poverty from buying a $60 ladder. There's no amount of money, no technology improvements, or increase in the number of border guards that can prevent people who dream of a better life from going to the Home Depot, or in this case, Femco Centro Do It, located just 1 mile from the U.S. border in Tijuana, Mexico.
Fiscal year 2017, we made approximately 70 arrests every day on average.
Sorry, I said 70 arrests per day.
Yes, San Diego sector ended up with approximately 70 arrests per day on fiscal year 2017 on average.
For a moment, let's put aside the politics so that I can finally reveal Trump's true motive for building a $70 billion border wall. As a father, he is 100% determined to protect America's precious children from the hundreds of thousands of Mexicans who sneak into the U.S. to rape and murder. I'm just kidding. It's the same reason he attacks war widows. It's to distract us from the Russia investigation, his failed policies, his petty vengeance schemes, and his own incompetence. The walls are 30 feet high and about 18 feet wide. 4 of the 8 are made out of concrete. The other 4, a material that is not concrete. Some of them are solid top to bottom. Others allow border agents to see what's on the other side. They also include 4 feet of material beneath the wall that will slow down or prevent tunneling. The contractors were given marching orders to make a wall that is more difficult to go through, more difficult to tunnel under, and more difficult to go over. During November and December of 2017, the Department of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol will test the wall's effectiveness. In the new year, they will make a recommendation to the White House. Trump will then announce his decision in prime time, the same way that The Bachelor reveals which woman he's going to marry. So, my decision on the border wall is... I will have the answer right after these words from Trump Hotel, where our motto is comfort, cleanliness, and convenience.
Border Patrol actually patrols in between ports of entry. Anybody coming into the United States, it's required to present themselves for inspection at a port of entry with OFO, Office of Field Operations, which is Customs. If you're not going through a port of entry and you're going somewhere else, which would be through the mountain desert, there's a reason why. I wouldn't let anybody just in my house. I would want to know who they are and what their intentions are. I do have my family to protect and myself. Border Patrol, its goal is to do that, to make sure that nothing crosses without being inspected. We do the best that we can. The men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol work every day to accomplish that goal.
Before we get any further, let me show you how the U.S. border is currently protected. In areas close to a large population, like here in Tijuana, the Border Patrol uses a layered approach. There are actually 2 border obstacles.
Building a more efficient secondary wall will make our layer approach that we have here in San Diego sector more efficient.
The first is erected right on the actual border. These 6 to 8 foot tall corrugated sheets of metal were first installed in the early 1990s and were originally used as portable landing pads for helicopters in Vietnam. Then there is a second barrier that is taller, 10 to 14 feet, that is supposed to be more difficult to climb, dig under, or to go through. The second barrier and the first barrier are separated by some distance depending on the topography or population. This second barrier may also have concertina wire on top, on the bottom, or in both places. This area in between is meant to be wide enough so that when Border Patrol determines a breach has been made to the first wall using, say, cameras or sensors, they can then mobilize a team of agents to catch the illegals before they cross the open space and breach the second barrier. And then cut through the fence here on the right.
They'll climb or they'll dig a rudimentary tunnel underneath it, and then they'll cut the secondary fence. Secondary fence is still mesh. This is anywhere from 14 to 18 feet high with concertina wire in this area right here. It is compromised, meaning cut almost every day. We average one about every day. Last fiscal year, 2016, we ended up with approximately 550 compromises.
Other areas of the border have slightly different barrier configurations, and not all areas utilize this layered approach. In some spots, there is just one barrier between the U.S. and Mexico. So, even though I'm a liberal, I agree that illegal immigration to the United States is a problem. However, the size of that problem and how it's dealt with depend upon a lot of things. Your tolerance for people who are not like you, what you consider a crime, and your appetite for punishment. The sense of obligation and empathy that you feel towards others who are less well off, and your priorities for spending taxpayer money. Oh, and there's one other thing. Whether or not you think America's young people deserve their own Selma Hayek and Antonio Banderas. The Senate Homeland Security Committee estimates that adding Trump's proposed 1,000 miles of new border wall will cost about $70 billion. And that's just the construction, not the cost of acquiring the land on which to build. It's an enormous detail that we'll cover in just a bit. But first, a couple more facts. In the U.S. today, there are approximately 11 million undocumented immigrants. It's a number that's been pretty steady since 2007. The number of illegal immigrants in U.S. detention is about 41,000, a 25% increase over previous years. One government watchdog estimates that illegal immigrants cost America's taxpayers $134 billion a year, minus the $19 billion or so that illegals pay in federal, state, and local taxes. Along with illegals from Mexico, more than 90,000 Mexicans legally cross the border in San Ysidro every day into the U.S. It's the busiest land port in the Western Hemisphere. Mexicans pass through this facility on their way to school, on their way to work, to shop, get medical treatment, and visit with family and friends. And the ones who aren't doing any of that, of course, they play in a mariachi band at Dave & Buster's. If you believe President Trump, illegal immigrants have stolen America's jobs, drained our bank accounts, and are filling our prisons. Even worse, illegal immigrants don't have to pay extra to DirecTV for the subtitles on Narcos. The point is, Trump says something's got to be done. And he's not talking about the one immigrant doing that one awful job that no American could possibly stomach. So, now that you know the facts, I'm going to share with you 7 reasons Trump's proposed border wall is both incredibly stupid and totally absolutely stupid. And I actually have one good example where the wall could actually do some good. Of the 2,000 miles of border that the U.S. has with Mexico, 700 miles already have border protection. Trump wants to add about 1,000 more miles of border wall. 2/3 of the land on which some of that future border wall will be constructed is owned by private American citizens. What if those people don't want to sell their land? What if those people don't want a giant fucking wall in their backyard? Yes, the government can try and take the land using eminent domain. However, that still requires that landowners receive some just compensation. The problem is that much of this land along the U.S.-Mexico border has never been sold. It's been in families for more than 100 years. How do you determine this land's fair market value? I think in some cases that the last time some of that land was sold, it was part of the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, look, that might not be entirely right, but you get the point. The lawsuits that will arise from invoking eminent domain will take multiple years to resolve.
When somebody says, well, we're going to build a wall, regardless, we're going to take your land, regardless, that's a little bit too much. Am I going to fight it? Pardon my language, but hell yeah. Hell yeah.
The second reason that construction won't happen is that hundreds of miles of borderland are owned by American Indian tribes. Taking this land will require new legislation from Congress. And quite frankly, I just don't think America has the stomach for taking the land from American Indians again. Next, as you can see here, these wall prototypes are being built on flat terrain, and the terrain that the excavators and other heavy equipment had to traverse to get here was flat as well. However, much of the land on which the new border wall will be built is mountainous, inhospitable, and steep, and those are its good qualities. I mean, look, my contractor went over budget by 20% because my wife changed the color of the stucco on the fireplace from blue to a slightly less blue. Now imagine the cost overruns for getting and moving multiple hundreds of thousands of cement mixers, dozens of construction cranes and backhoes, and hundreds of people in hard hats. Oh wait, before they can deliver the construction equipment and build the wall, they have to build a road first. Another problem is that the Trump administration has not done a cost analysis that would reveal if spending $70 billion on a border wall would be more effective at slowing illegal immigration than spending that same amount of money on, say, more personnel or improved technology. Plus, a recent report by NBC revealed that 66% of immigrants who took up residence in the United States illegally in 2014 came to America legally and overstayed their visa. no border wall, no matter how high or how deep, will have any effect on that. Next, President Trump says that the border wall will also deter smuggling of drugs into the U.S. And yet, there are no accurate numbers that compare by volume or street value how illegal drugs get into the United States. Are illegal drugs smuggled across the border on foot? Are they brought through secret tunnels underneath the border? Right here, Border Patrol found several tunnels that start on the Mexico side of the border and end inside one of these warehouses on the U.S. side. It's a distance of a few hundred yards. Or maybe more illegal drugs are coming across the border in trucks carrying other goods. Maybe more drugs are flown into the U.S., or maybe drugs come by boat. The problem is, we don't know. Perhaps the most significant issue is one the U.S. has the least control over, and that's poverty. Not only along our border, but poverty in most of Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, among others. Because that's who this border wall is really about. Poor people from Latin America. But to Trump, regardless of nationality, they're all Mexicans. Mexicans who rape, murder, and steal our jobs. For now, let's focus on Tijuana more specifically. What we learn here will apply across the board. This area right here in Tijuana, along our border, is likely Tijuana's poorest community. There are hundreds of homes that lack basic necessities like running water, electricity, and sanitation. Closer inspection reveals most of the roofs are just sheets of plywood, covered by some cloth material weighed down by old tires. The people here don't have a proper way to dispose of their garbage, so they just toss it over the border wall. If this is how you live, or maybe you're doing slightly better, maybe your roof is held down with, say, radial tires. If this is how you live, if this is how your parents lived, and if this is how your kids are going to live, and the land of milk and honey, and toilets that flush, is just down the road, over that fence, no border wall, no razor wire, no sensors, no guards would stop you from trying every single day, all the time, to improve the quality of your life. You will eventually figure out how to get over the wall, to tunnel under it or bust through it. Okay, here we go, quick summary. Here's why the border wall, as President Trump has promised, 1,000 miles, both won't happen and is incredibly stupid. Number one, it costs way too much money. Number two, land owned by private citizens. Number three, land owned by American Indians. Number four, the terrain is not conducive to building, plus there's no roads. Number five, we have no idea if spending that amount of money would not be better spent on personnel or technology. Number six, 2/3 of illegal immigrants come to the U.S. legally and overstay their welcome. Number seven, the border wall will not solve Latin American poverty. Now look, I did promise you the facts about where a new border wall would actually be effective. The answer is in the parts of the San Diego sector that get the most traffic. In fact, any border area that backs up to a large Mexican population center would be a good place to put a giant ugly wall. Remember, Border Patrol catches 70 people a day along San Diego's 61 miles of border and misses a few hundred others because they either escape detection entirely or they breach the second wall before Border Patrol can catch them.
Infrastructure in San Diego sector, we use it as a layer approach. We have a primary wall, a secondary wall. That allows us time to make the arrest. So if an agent's not in the area, it buys us a few minutes to respond.
You're saying that because you detect a breach on one wall, and then there's time before they get to the other wall and breach that.
Correct. It could be that an agent sees it through a scope, or an agent sees it through a camera. Maybe there's a sensor that was activated, and now we actually have time to respond.
So, if agents had more time once they detected a breach and before the illegals disappeared into the mountains or the population areas, they'd catch more people. If the second wall was more difficult to break through, tunnel under, or climb over, border agents would have enough time to get to them and to place them under arrest. Okay, so that's it for this special edition of Be Less Stupid. If you enjoyed it, or you learned something, or you got this far into the video, please share it with your friends on social media. That'd be a big help. Also, if you would like to advertise during this show, during Be Less Stupid, you can reach us at info@belessstupid.com. And remember to like our Facebook page. That way you can get new videos 2 or 3 times a week in your timeline. And for the time being, good news, it's all still totally free. All right, that's it. I'll see you next time on Be Less Stupid.